Okay, I would like to call the November policy meeting to order. And I will start with asking Ashley Kitten, our Director of Human Resources, if there's any announcements.
No announcements.
Thank you. Now we will move on to minutes. Has the committee had a chance to look at the minutes from last month? Yes? Okay, and so we are comfortable moving that forward to the legislative. Okay, and we will move on to old business, second reading.
So policies 103.1 through 803 on that list in old business up for second reading. All of our previous conversation is and should be reflected in all of those. I'll leave it up to the committee to have any conversation about anything that's additional that we need to talk about. So I'll let that discussion happen.
Does anyone have comments on the old business second readings? Which one? Yeah. Oh, Jeff, can you?
For 103.1, educational equity, for 3.1.4, it mentions the district shall provide all students, and then it lists a lot of things, including employment. And
Okay,
I was just,
I'm going to stop you right there. So we are repealing 103.1.
okay, sorry.
Because
thank you.
it's contained inside, is it 287, something 87? 827. I almost had it. No close yet, off by 600. Okay, sorry, Dr. Thomason. Before we went down that rabbit hole, I just wanted to, okay. Do you have any other comments on the, okay. Jenna, you're still looking? Okay.
This is on 803, school calendar. I think this would be a non-substantive change, and I'm not going to die on the hill, but in 1.2, it says that the board shall determine annually the days and hours, and I don't know whether I take more issue with the word board or the word determine. We definitely would approve the school calendar, but we're not really, obviously a recommendation is made to the board. We're approving the calendar. So maybe it was the verb determine. It just made it sound like we're literally sitting down, the 9 of us, and figuring out the calendar, which I assure you is not what happens and not what anybody should want to have happen. But we obviously approve it. Again, I'm not going to die on the hill if people are like, it's fine. But that word just kind of stuck out to me because it makes it sound like we're literally doing it.
We have no obligation to stick to that word. We can easily change it to approve.
Okay, so.
Ms. Ionetti, could I comment on 2.0 or 202?
Yes, of course.
I just wanted to comment that last month, I believe the board asked for some further definition of the number of students in each current class, particularly class 1 and 4. And I did provide that to board. The numbers in those two classes are very small. I believe 1 in, I think it is class 4, and I think it might have been 0 in the other one. I apologize, I don't have it right in front of me. I also wanted to let the board know that we are working with Mr. Leckman to create an admin reg for, I believe it's policy 607, which is on tuition, but that would address the tuition collection component of policy 202. We're just working through some fine details on that yet, but the AR for policy 202 has been updated and is attached to reflect the changes that we made to policy 202, and it now includes a form by which if a parent is moving into the district or leaving the district and desires to request their child to either start before they've moved in or to say after, it's the form by which to start that process. We didn't have an official way that they did that. It was either, word of mouth and then an email. So we've created a form as part of the AR that they would fill out and then be submitting to my office and the registrar to confirm those pieces. That would then prompt that. It would have my approval on it, and then also prompt any type of tuition waiver or request for tuition relief that is permitted by the policy.
Okay, thank you. Anything else in this section? Old business. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Sorry, this is in the AR for 202, and I have in my notes here, I don't recall exactly where it lives, but there is a line that talks about notification which shall be sent to the parent guardian. The relevant section of this sentence is by certified mail, first class mail, and electronic mail if available. And I guess I was just asking, do we need all of those things? Is there a difference between, certified mail I understand, but do you need certified mail and first class mail? Is there a reason that we have all of those?
I do believe that certified and first class are required because not everybody picks up their certified, so we also mail it first class. And then the electronic, I don't know that that's required, but honestly, that way has reached a lot more parents in our experience than the other two formats.
And I say leave it as is.
I would think if you have a PO box, you can't do certified. I don't know. I don't even know if that could happen.
Very helpful, then I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, so we're good with old business. Okay, so that will bring us to new business. And when we look at local policy review, there is nothing there. So we're on to the first reading, legal PSBA policy news network recommendations.
I'll make some generalized comments about 222, 227, and 323, which are the first kind of three sections that we're going to be talking about. And then, of course, I'll turn it over to you all for questions and comments. I know that there was a lot of, well, not a lot, but there was some question about the definition of a tobacco product or vape device, right? Because we're seeing a lot of that language in here. So when we look at the PNN and we look at our PSBA recommendations, this is what comes out of that. So I know that it's a little confusing and we can certainly wordsmith it if there is some concern with what those things look like. It's not legally required to read like this, but it's the PSBA recommendation that it be defined as tobacco-related products with vaping devices underneath that, and then they subsequently just use tobacco products throughout. So again, not legally required, but PSBA recommendation. And then independently, what is not included is anything that is potentially sold through a dispensary that might include medical marijuana that's covered in a different policy. So just to kind of give that overview before we have conversation, and then I'll turn it over to you all.
All right, so let's start with 222. Use of tobacco and smoking-related products. Who would like to start? John?
So I had raised, or was one of several who may have raised the question about the definition of vaping products as, a tobacco product. It is a wonky definition because vaping products do not contain tobacco. However, it is self-contained and defined within this policy. And so the grammarian in me is having a lot of trouble with it. However, as a policy committee member, I can be okay with it.
You have that on your list too, anybody else? Yeah, it bothers me too.
Do you want me to take a crack at trying to reword it to make it feel and sound better for the next time we read it?
Right, so, would you just, are you gonna create definitions? Is that?
Based on some notes and some questions that a few of you had independently, I think that we could try to wordsmith it without trying to do that here at the table,
Right.
And bring back a recommendation that feels a little bit better. Like I said, I'm probably always going to defer to PSBA and the way that they try to word things. It feels better when we're doing comparisons with other districts. It feels better when we're making corrections. But if it's something that this committee and this board feel strongly about, you can tell us and we'll try really hard to rework that to be something that you all feel is good.
Well, I mean, without it being defined, like when I have in my notes, when it gets down to the 2.4.2, I am like, this makes no sense to me. It says a device included, so 2.4 says the term tobacco product does not include the following. And then when you go down to 2.4.2, a device included under the definition of tobacco product above, if sold by a dispensary licensed in compliance with the Medical Marijuana Act. Like, now
So I can
so
shed some light on that for you,
okay.
absolutely. So if we're looking at the definition of tobacco product, which is in 2.2, and it says any electronic device that delivers nicotine, right? And then we go down to 2.4 that says the term tobacco product that does not include the following, and we're looking at 2.4.2, a device that might be an electronic device that delivers nicotine, but it's mixed with something that needs to be sold from a dispensary. That would not then be included in this policy. It would defer to our drug and substance. Does that help? Because it's not solely nicotine or tobacco. So this policy is truly intended to be something that might otherwise be completely legal for you to have and you not need a medical marijuana card to have covered, but something that contains any portion of anything that could be sold in a dispensary, would be under that Medical Marijuana Act.
See, when I read it, to me, I read it as like, you might have something that's legal in your state, but not legal at the federal level. That was how I read that sentence down there. Because I couldn't, because they throw in, federal law requires the district to maintain a drug-free workplace at which marijuana of any kind is prohibited.
And that is what you would defer to if any one of these above devices was sold from a dispensary licensed in compliance with that act. We are legally required to have a policy that prohibits that, which is the last sentence in 2.4.2. So if that device that is otherwise a tobacco product that includes marijuana, we would defer to a different policy and it would not be housed in this.
I guess I don't know enough about what's in those devices.
I promise I will administer this policy.
Okay. Well, I think maybe putting some definitions in there would help clear this up, because Anna's saying yes.
Wonder if it would help to refer to the other policy as well.
And that's what we do at the end. Ms. Brooke Evans and I make sure that everything is linked out to other policies or law applicable, so that those things would be easy to click through. That's just done at the end because we want to make sure that we're linking to the correct things once all is said and done. Absolutely.
And the title of this policy is use of tobacco and smoking related products. And so I think if we move to a place where we are defining, there's a section of here's what a tobacco product is, here's what smoking related products are. But I think there is a way to parse those out.
Okay, that gives me good guidance.
Okay, and smoking related products would be, I think, the vaping devices we're talking about.
I have more on this policy. Who else? John, do you have more? You want to?
No, I'm good.
Jenna? I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so for 222, we're still in 222, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in 1.1 and 1.2, the verb that we use is, we're prohibiting the use of these products, but I think it's more than that, right? It's the use and possession, right? And actually later in the policy, in the guidelines, in 3.2, we say that incidents of possession, use, and sale are, will be reported. So I think we have to go beyond just use. This is also possession, right?
I think it depends on the sentence. I think the first one is talking about a health and safety hazard. So the possession might not create that.
But I think 1.2 it would, right? Because we're saying this is what we're prohibiting. So it says the board prohibits the use of tobacco and smoking related vaping products, including blah, blah, blah. But I think it should be use, possession, and sale, because those are actually the verbs then that we use later that would be reported. Yeah, and
Wait, before, you're not moving on, are you? I
not
have
to a different policy, but just to,
I want to go on to 1.1 because
Okay,
I have
yeah,
something there
yeah.
too. So I think at 1.1, we should begin with a statement that's something like the board declares it to be the policy of this district, and I emailed this to you, to create a safe and healthy environment free of tobacco and smoking related vaping products. We got away from purpose statements, and that the beginning of 1.1 is a purpose statement. And I just think it makes things more confusing. Like it says, the board recognizes that the use of tobacco and smoking related vaping products, including electronics during work hours. We don't need that, the purpose statement. We just need to say, this is not prohibited.
You're absolutely correct. We could just start with 1.2 if that's the will of the committee.
But I do think we probably need a sentence. Word prohibit, okay. Yeah. I think we could go 1.2 and just get rid of 1.
and that's fine, because I have something else on 1.1 that if we get rid of 1.1 will be irrelevant, which is, it uses the term working hours and students don't work here. So, yeah, maybe that's from, I think we have a similar policy for employees, and it's probably just a carryover from that. So if we get rid of 1.1, then that becomes a moot point, but, yeah.
I had a question about, find it.
Same policy.
This is, cessation products. I wonder if, and this may be in another policy, but like, does that need to be approved through the nurse? Those things could pose a risk too if they kind of get left laying around, or, patches and gum and different things. That, like, just speculate what those things might be, and that they need to be handled with care.
2.4.
I don't know if it matters if it's over the counter or prescription, or, things along those.
2.4.1.
I can look into if there are any other guidelines. I think the purpose is to just create the definition to say that this is not included as a tobacco product, but I can take a look to see if there's any specific guidelines to look for.
You have more on this policy too, Jen, right? You're good? Do you have more on this policy, Dr. Thomas? John? No? Okay. We're good with 222. So yeah, now 227. Prohibited, illegal, and other controlled substances. Okay, Jenna's gonna start us off.
So for me, 3.4, the new part that was added in green, I think we took this language from the tobacco policy that we just talked about, because it says incidents of prohibited possession, use, and sale of tobacco products, but this one is about controlled substances, so I think we just have to change. Does that make sense? That was it for me.
Okay. John, do you have anything on this one?
So this was, I think, more of just a question. Under 1.3, this policy shall also apply to student conduct that occurs off school property or during non-school hours. And the question I had was about the second half of the sentence, to the same extent as provided in board policy on student discipline. And then I think there's a 14 after that. Is that another policy that we're referring to? And do we have linking capability, or should we be precise what policy that is?
That's exactly where it will be linked, and it will go right to that policy.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay. I have on this one sort of similar to 222, the last policy we did. If you go to 1.1, get rid of that purpose statement. So we could say something like, the board declares it to be the policy of this district that students are prohibited from possessing, using, and or distributing controlled substances, except as permitted by applicable state or federal law. Get rid of that, you know, where it says that the use of abusive controlled substances as defined in the policy is a serious problem. That value judgment, just get rid of that. And just say.
So similar to 222, if
Yeah.
we got rid of the first full sentence and then the second sentence just says the board prohibits student possession, that sentence stays, because that's the point back to the law.
Yeah.
Question mark.
Right? Everyone understand? We're just getting rid of that sort of like
Yep.
purposey.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. And 1.2, I have written down, does this belong under guidelines? So the board may require participation in drug counseling, rehab testing, or other programs as a condition of reinstatement. So I guess that's my question. Should that say something like the superintendent or superintendent designee's responsibility? You know, it will be their responsibility. Or we tell the superintendent, I don't know. I kind of think it is in the wrong spot.
I think it can exist anywhere. I think that it could easily move to 4, delegation of responsibility. I think that it could potentially move to guidelines. We can feel out where it might fit.
An opinion on that, follow? Yeah, I think that we're telling the superintendent to make a decision about that. Like, you know what I mean? We're not deciding if the student is going to counseling. We're asking the superintendent to, we're encouraging.
That makes sense.
All right. Anything else on this one? Yes, Jeff. Yes.
You have one. How is that not working?
The only question I had, we put the word prohibited in front of possession in a couple of spots. So, for example, in 3.2.1, it says the prohibited possession of, or blah, 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 of prohibited items. And so my question is, the insertion of prohibited before possession, does that mean there is a proper possession of a prohibited item?
There could be. I can't give you an example right now.
Okay.
I can come up with one, I promise you. Mr. Diazio and I had this conversation because the word prohibited shows up in the PSBA recommendations because of that reason, that there were instances of staff or students being allowed to possess something to potentially, I don't know, bring it into school or provide or bring home or something like that. But I can't think of an example off the top of my head. But I certainly can get one.
I had a question about 3.3.2. The administration may search the person, personal effects, lockers, and automobiles of students. The automobile thing struck me funny. The other items are like on school property and are owned by the school. That seems like more of a law enforcement role. I just wanted to make sure that that's legal.
Yeah, if the automobile is on school property, yes.
And like, you can compel the student to open the vehicle for you, and what if they don't, okay.
Mhm.
And then like, maybe there's something in a vehicle that doesn't belong to a student. Vehicle, just kind of thinking about those.
Yeah, I think that would
complexities.
work itself out through the process that followed this. Sure.
All right, anything else on this 227? Yeah. All right, moving on. Next, we have 323. Tobacco and smoking related products use. Is this
For employees.
employees? Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
I will take the same notes from the student and apply them to this, assuming that we feel the same way. Okay, good. Yeah.
Any, no, yeah, mine were just repeat. Yeah. Okay.
Jen,
Oh,
can I ask one? In 1.4 and 1.5, we talk about district employee or contracted personnel. In 1.3, we only say district employees. And I guess my question is, the definition of contracted personnel, meaning, is there the possibility that a contracted person could be responsible for the supervision of students such that we should put contracted personnel into 1.3?
I think that would be remiss if we didn't.
Okay, so the next one is 807. Opening exercises. You want to start? Jenna's going to start.
Okay, so 1.4, we have this bolded sentence about providing the moment of silence on the anniversary of September 11th. Is that a requirement? I'm certainly not opposed to it. I want to be very clear, but it's in like bold, so I just
Yeah, I actually couldn't change it from the bold when we updated the PSBA PNN legal update. We tried to remove the bold and couldn't, so I promise it's not like extra legal. Yeah.
When I go back to PSBA and before they do that, Brooke works with them to work out all those glitches. Yeah, but it is required.
yeah, it just literally the bold. I was like, wow, this must be like really required, like super duper ultra required. Okay, yeah, okay, no problem. In 1.5, the United States flag shall be displayed. It doesn't say where. I mean, I presume this means outside of the building, right?
Well, this is opening exercise.
Well, but later it says that the next sentence says a Pennsylvania flag may also be displayed at each school building. So even if we just want to copy that language, because to your point, I thought the same thing, Jen, that we're talking about, this is, Pledge of Allegiance.
Right.
I assume that originally meant in the classroom, but then it kind of goes on to talk more broadly about flags. So I guess maybe that's a question. Is this only supposed to be limited to in the classroom, or is this just flags in general?
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback on that because I wrote down, because they mentioned the Pennsylvania flag, but they just say may. I'm assuming this is coming from PSBA, and I'm just wondering, is it implying that other flags may not be flown? And I'm just worried this is becoming a flag policy within our opening exercises policy.
Hopefully this helps. The first sentence of 1.5 is required by school code. The subsequent sentences are left over from Upper Dublin policy from the last time it was revised in 2018. Those are not legally required to be had. That was previous board language that they or you or whomever wanted to have in. So you can discuss at will. The first sentence is the only one that is required.
Ms. Kitten, can we add to that first sentence, the at each school building or as determined by superintendent or superintendent's designee, or would you recommend no, we just leave that sentence the way it is?
I think that as determined by superintendent or superintendent's designee lets you do that, or you can add. I don't think there's a need to decide one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Pennsylvania flag sentence should go, just because I think it's misleading.
I'd agree with that because this is, I think, to Ms. Evans' point, an opening exercises policy. And so that also to me reads as if it's a flag displayed outside the building or elsewhere. And so I agree with that.
Dr. Thomas, you okay with that? Yeah. Okay, so we're striking the Pennsylvania flag statement.
Are we just keeping the first sentence in 1.5, or are we just striking the Pennsylvania flag sentence?
I would strike that. Is the last sentence a requirement? Students shall receive instruction. I was assuming we were required to do that.
That's not a requirement. It's the last sentence in 1.5. The only legal requirement in 1.5 is the first sentence.
Yeah, I would also, I would get rid of that sentence.
Okay, so we're just keeping the first sentence. Tizia.
I'm just curious, in the definition, it says opening exercises refer to the period of time at the start of the school day. Does this also refer to opening exercises or anything during sports or other events?
I think it's just intended to cover the beginning of each school day.
And we're not concerned about the placement of the flag or the proximity of the flag or anything. So it doesn't say anything that the flag should be present in the particular room. Is that
The only requirement
intentional?
we have is that first sentence.
Yeah, I
Alright.
mean, I don't know if we have a flag policy, but there's like a lot of rules with the flags I've learned over the years. So I don't want to have anything extra about flags in here if we don't need it.
I totally agree because the next thing I wrote underneath was, what about other flags? I mean, we all know we fly a pride flag, so I agree. Just if we limit this to just what I think its purpose is, which is exactly what it says. The beginning of the school day, we all know the children recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, fine. Then get all the other flag talk out of there would be good.
But to Teach's point, maybe it needs to say school day so that it's not opening exercises of like.
Under
Oh,
definition in
It
2.1
says that.
it
It
does.
says
Oh, it
that under
does say that, okay,
definition.
okay.
I just wanted to clarify that was just for the opening of the school day and not any other event.
I'm getting a flashing on the mic, so it might be running out of battery, so just let me know. I don't know what that means. In 2.1, so let me back up. In 1.4, it says that,
Just use this.
okay. All right, sorry. In 1.4, it says opening exercises can include a moment of silent meditation. Okay, fine. Then when we get down to 2.1, it says, during which students recite the Pledge of Allegiance and or participate in a brief moment of individual prayer or meditation. I'm trying to be sensitive to use of the word prayer. I know that some students may choose to do that during the meditation moment, which is their right as far as I'm concerned, but I get sensitive when I see the word prayer in our policy. So I prefer to just call it meditation and you do with that time what you want. Is that fair?
I love that I'm getting to know you guys so well, so you're going to love this, Ms. Evans. Section 1516.1 of the Pennsylvania School Code requires us to use that language. So I had that nice and pulled up and ready for you.
I do have two more. 3.1. I have to go there first and see. Oh, it doesn't, there's nothing under, that's why it doesn't make sense. There's no 3.1, but I think that there should be, so what did I write down? Does it need some guidelines, perhaps something that starts with the superintendent or the superintendent's designee shall ensure. And this was going, at one point, we had the students were gonna be instructed on this, but we took that out. So maybe we don't need that, but it still would need to be in the handbook or in the something. The superintendent still has to do something with this information, right? There should be at least one guideline. No?
I mean, I'm gonna make sure that our principals know they have to follow this policy and they need to have the moment of silence. I guess we could put a statement there that
Yeah, 'cause
shall
the moment of silence is new.
It's a tough one.
I feel like the directives and the authority provide everybody with the kind of the charge. I feel like it's a pretty specific policy. I feel like guidelines might be repetitive, but if the board feels strongly, we could certainly come up with something.
Yes.
One suggestion might be, some of what's in authority feels like it actually could be more guidelines, so, clearly 1.1 sounds like authority, maybe even 1.2, but then when you kind of get down to the rest of it, maybe we move some of that stuff to guidelines, because that really is more of the nitty gritty, not just the authority type stuff.
Okay.
While I have the mic, I have a question, sorry, about the September 11th thing. Again, not opposed to it whatsoever. What happens when September 11th is on a weekend? Do we know what we're supposed to do? Do we do it on a Friday? Do we do it on a Monday? I'm not necessarily saying we have to address it in the policy, but I would just be prepared to address how we handle that practically.
The policy doesn't say it has to occur on September 11th, just to observe it. So I'd imagine the district will make a determination the next closest school day.
Yeah, or sometimes we receive, like this is the day we are observing a particular holiday, and that's like sent to us from the government, so I would imagine we would follow whatever.
I just had a quick question about 2.1. Is the and/or for the pledge and for the moment of silence, is that from PBSA, or is it supposed to be both, or?
That is school code, because students don't have to recite the pledge.
Okay, so, you're okay, you're gonna move some of the things to.
Yep. Yeah, I'll move those down to guidelines that feel applicable.
And then, I might have, but my only thing I would say for delegation of responsibility is that especially if it's not on the weekend, like the superintendent will inform the principals when to observe the September 11th. You think it's not necessary? Does everyone think that's not necessary? No one cares. It's
I think it's pretty
late.
direct. Yeah.
Okay, it's there, it's already in there. I was just moving it to that lonely section, but we'll leave it. Okay, so I think we're done with that one for now. And then, 809, is that next?
Yep, 809 is controlled substances alcohol testing for covered drivers. The one thing I'll point out before discussion on this is there are a lot more stringent guidelines for covered drivers. The Department of Transportation has very strict guidelines for what covered drivers need to follow. So whereas other individuals may have some ADA requirements that I might work through with them, there's kind of a zero tolerance for those things with covered drivers. So keep that in mind as we're talking.
I'm just, before anyone says anything about 1.1, I don't think we need it. It's that same value judgment. That's all I have. John?
So I too on this one. Under 3.3, the last sentence says any result being returned is diluted will be treated as a positive test. The word diluted is in scare quotes, and I was wondering why that was, and if there's a definition that lives elsewhere. And then I had a second question, if I can hold until we address that one.
What number is that?
3.3, the last
3.
sentence.
Within the laws and regulations from the Department of Transportation, that's how it reads, and that's why it's the addition. So I can take a look at that and see if there's anything additional, but I put it in as it exists for DOT.
Thank you. It was just odd that it was in scare quotes.
Sure.
And I don't see other words that are getting that sort of formatting, so that was the question on
Sure.
that one. And then under 3.4, that relates to somebody providing a sample and they have a certain amount of time to do it. People have different medical conditions, and I mean, 3 hours seems like a long time, and 40 ounces seems like a lot of liquid, but are there any provisions for somebody who does have some sort of medical condition that would prevent them from providing a sample?
Unfortunately, not for Department of Transportation. For others, yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Jenna?
Since we're on that section, I'll go a little out of order. I have to admit, some of the stuff in the guidelines feels really specific for a board policy. I mean, we are talking about people giving samples and people having to create accounts with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. So I'm going to channel Mark Sirota here a little bit and say this feels some of this like things that would get pushed down to an AR, unless there's a reason it has to be in the policy, because it's getting real granular. I mean, yeah, we're talking about people giving samples and how much time they have to do.
Welcome to my job. We can certainly just say as per state and federal law, right? We can point to those things. So if and when it changes, we don't need to be this specific. I don't even think it needs to exist in an AR, to be honest, because I think our intention would be to follow the law regardless of what that law is.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for example, the 3.1, the first sentence, right, kind of sums it up. Staff shall be required to undergo testing for controlled substances and alcohol as required by law. Period. Done. Right? We don't have to get into all the 3 hours and the. So, yeah. So maybe that'll help alleviate some of your concerns.
I'll rework that. I'll rework that with that in mind.
Agreed.
Okay, and then I had. Okay. In 1.3, and again, you may tell me this is in the statute because I didn't check. I'm sorry. The alcohol concentration of 0.02. When I read it, I think, well, I don't want anybody to have any, right? But I guess I don't know enough about blood alcohol concentration, and is that practically zero? I don't know, but I'm gonna assume that came out of statute. But if not, there's just something odd to me about giving a concession that it's okay to have anything, if that makes sense.
I'm sorry, what number?
I'm sorry, 1.3. There's a reference near the end, while consuming or possessing alcohol, obviously, having an alcohol concentration of 0.02 or greater, which suggests that you could have a 0.019 and that's okay. And to me, that's not, but I'm going to guess this had to come from somewhere because it's so specific.
It's from the Department of Transportation. Again, I can look at what that language is and just point back to what the regulation is, right? Because we can't be more or less, we can't change the requirement, but we can certainly not call it out and just point back to that in case it does change. But that is directly from covered drivers with DOT.
I just had a question about whether law enforcement would be notified if someone permit to be driving, and would they be allowed to, if they're dismissed from work, would they be allowed to drive home?
So this wouldn't typically, I get, it would depend. So yes, if it were during the course of a work day, no, if it were pre-employment drug testing or alcohol testing.
Yeah, just a clarification on 3.1. The last options are return to work and follow up. Return to work, is that just after any discontinued service? And what is intended with the follow-up piece?
So I'm trying to think of an example. So if somebody, if an employee took a leave of absence and returned to work with the provision that they needed to submit to regular testing, that might be follow-up.
Oh, there needs to be some sort of a
Right, it might be in a separate written agreement, right? It would be maybe a last chance agreement for an employee or something like that.
Okay, anything else on this one? At the end of it? All right, that brings us to public participation. Speakers are required to state their name and their city of residence or affirm they are a resident or a taxpayer in the district before addressing the board. Seeing no one approaching, I'm going to close public participation. The next policy committee meeting will be, wait a minute, I wrote it down. Oh yeah, Wednesday, December 4th at 6 p.m. or immediately following the education committee. Focused on the 6 o'clock. Okay. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.